The chandeliers flickered, sending ripples of golden light across the sterling ballroom's marble floor. Each crystal pendant caught the light differently, creating a constellation above the sea of vampires in their finery. The air tasted stale despite the open French doors, heavy with expensive perfumes trying to mask the underlying scent of blood and predation. I adjusted my white serving gloves, tugging at the tight cuffs that chafed against my wrists, where the skin was already raw. The silver tray in my hands reflected my pale face, dark circles prominent beneath eyes that hadn't known proper sleep in months. My black uniform, mandatory for all human servants, felt particularly constricting tonight, the collar high and tight against my throat, where my pulse betrayed my anxiety. The weight of the crystal glasses on my tray made my arms ache. I'd been standing in the same position for nearly an hour, waiting for Vance Sterling to summon me when he required a refill of the special vintage. O negative with notes of fear, harvested from a human who'd been told stories of what awaited them. The Sterlings preferred their blood seasoned with terror. A string quartet played in the corner, their fingers moving with inhuman precision across their instruments. The melody was beautiful but hollow, like everything in this world. I focused on the music, trying to ignore the occasional glances from vampires who looked at me like I was merely another appetizer. "You're swaying," came a cold whisper from behind. I stiffened immediately, feeling the familiar chill that accompanied Vance's presence. The air around him always seemed several degrees colder, as if warmth itself retreated from his approach. "I wasn't, sir," I murmured, keeping my eyes downcast as I'd been trained. The marble floor beneath my feet suddenly seemed fascinating, its gray veins like a map to nowhere. "Don't contradict me." His breath ghosted against my ear, smelling of blood and mint. "Remember your place, little debt-bearer." My fingers tightened around the tray until my knuckles whitened. The metal edge dug into my palms through the thin gloves, but I welcomed the pain. It kept me present, kept me from saying something that would cost Lila her treatments. Vance circled around me, his tailored black suit making no sound as he moved. He was beautiful in the way all vampires were. Perfect features, alabaster skin, eyes that shifted between gray and silver depending on his hunger. But his beauty was a warning, not an invitation. "The king arrives within the hour," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, platinum with blood-red stones that caught the light like wet wounds. "You will serve him directly. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact, and for God's sake, try not to smell so—" He leaned in, inhaling near my neck. Desperate. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse quicken traitorously. "Yes, sir." "And Paige?" His fingers brushed against my wrist, cold as marble. "If you embarrass the Sterling name tonight, I'll have to reconsider our arrangement regarding your sister's care." The mention of Lila sent ice through my veins. I nodded once, not trusting my voice. "Good girl." He plucked a glass from my tray and moved away, disappearing into the crowd of immortals who laughed and plotted and preyed upon one another in their endless games. I exhaled slowly, counting to 10 as I'd taught myself. 1 year down, 9 to go on my contract. 1 decade of servitude to pay for Lila's medical treatments. 1 sister's freedom for another's bondage. A fair trade, I told myself. A necessary sacrifice. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. The announcement of the king's arrival sent ripples through the gathering. Conversations hushed, postures straightened, and suddenly the air felt charged with an electric tension that raised the fine hairs on my arms. Even the quartet's melody shifted to something more formal, more reverent. Lady Corinne Sterling appeared at my side, her crimson gown whispering against the floor. Unlike her son, she didn't bother with the pretense of warmth. Her eyes were chips of ice, her lips a bloodless line as she assessed me. "You will serve the king's table directly," she said, her voice like silk over steel. "The vintage in the crystal decanter, nothing else. If he requests something different, you come to me first. Do you understand?" "Yes, Lady Sterling," I replied, keeping my gaze fixed on the third button of her dress. Her cold fingers gripped my chin, forcing my face up. "Look at me when I address you, debt-bearer." I met her eyes, fighting the instinctive fear that made my stomach clench. Lady Corinne was ancient, her power a palpable thing that pressed against my skin like a physical weight. But better. She released me, leaving behind the phantom sensation of her touch. "Remember that you represent the Sterling household tonight. Your behavior reflects on us." "I understand, my lady." She leaned closer, her perfume, roses, and something metallic, overwhelming my senses. "And should the king take any particular interest in you, you will decline. Politely. The Sterlings own your contract, and we do not share our property." My cheeks burned with humiliation. "That won't be necessary, Lady Sterling." Her laugh was like glass breaking. "Oh, child, you have no idea what is necessary in our world." She glided away, leaving me trembling slightly. I adjusted my grip on the tray, now laden with the special crystal decanter and matching glasses. The liquid inside caught the light strangely, thicker than wine but more translucent than blood should be. I didn't want to know its origin. The grand doors at the end of the ballroom opened, and a hush fell over the assembly. I couldn't see past the crowd of vampires, but I felt the shift in the atmosphere, a deepening of the pressure, as if the air itself grew heavier with power. "His Majesty Adrian, King of the Western Territories," announced a voice, and the crowd parted like a dark sea. I caught my first glimpse of him then, and despite all my training, I couldn't look away. The Vampire King moved with the fluid grace of an apex predator, tall and broad-shouldered in a suit so black it seemed to absorb the light around him. His hair was darker still, falling in waves to his shoulders, framing a face that was all sharp angles and perfect symmetry. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Deep crimson, like the heart of a flame, set in features that might have been carved from marble. They swept across the room, missing nothing, assessing everything. And then, for just a moment, they landed on me. The contact lasted less than a heartbeat, but I felt it like a physical touch, a brush of power that left me dizzy. I quickly lowered my gaze, my heart hammering against my ribs so loudly, I was certain every vampire in the room could hear it. Vance appeared at my side, his fingers digging into my elbow. "Stop staring," he hissed, "and control your pulse. You sound like a frightened rabbit." "I'm sorry," I whispered, focusing on steadying my breathing. "Come. The king is being seated. Remember your place, Paige." His grip tightened painfully. "And remember what depends on your good behavior." Lila's face flashed in my mind, her too thin features, the bruise-like shadows beneath her eyes, the brave smile she always managed when I visited. The treatments were working, slowly. The cancer was retreating. As long as I served my contract, she would live. I straightened my shoulders and followed Vance to the high table where the king now sat, surrounded by sterling vampires who smiled with their mouths, but not their eyes. Lady Corinne occupied the seat to his right, Vance the one to his left. "Your Majesty," Vance said, his voice smoother than I'd ever heard it, "may I present our finest vintage for your pleasure?" The king's gaze flicked to the decanter on my tray, then to my face. I kept my eyes downcast, but I could feel the weight of his attention like a physical pressure. "Approach," he said, and his voice was unexpected, deep and resonant, with an accent I couldn't place that spoke of centuries and distant lands. I stepped forward carefully, my hands steady through sheer force of will as I placed the tray on the table and began to pour the crimson liquid into his glass. The scent that rose from it was complex, copper and salt, but also something sweeter, almost floral. "Tell me," the king said suddenly, "what is your name?" The question, addressed directly to me, was so unexpected that I nearly fumbled the decanter. Vance stiffened beside me, his displeasure a tangible thing. "She is merely a servant, Your Majesty," he interjected smoothly. "A debt-bearer working off her sister's medical expenses." "I did not ask you, Vance Sterling," the king said, his tone unchanged but somehow carrying a warning that made the air temperature seem to drop. "I asked her," I swallowed, aware of every eye at the table now fixed on me. "Paige, Your Majesty," I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. "Paige," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "Look at me, Paige." Against every instinct and all my training, I raised my eyes to meet his. The connection was immediate and overwhelming, like standing at the edge of an abyss and feeling it looking back into me. His crimson gaze seemed to peel back layers, seeing past flesh and bone to something deeper. "How long is your contract?" he asked. 10 years, Your Majesty," I answered, unable to look away now that I'd met his eyes. "I've served one." Something flickered across his perfect features, a momentary tightening around his eyes, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Well, a decade of servitude for a human life," he mused. "The Sterlings have always been pragmatic in their business dealings." Lady Corinne's laugh was like ice cracking. "We provide a valuable service, Your Majesty. Medical care for the sister, purpose for this one. Everyone benefits." The king's gaze never left mine. "Is that how you see it, Paige? As a benefit?" I felt Vance tense beside me, saw Lady Corinne's warning glare from the corner of my eye. The truth clawed at my throat, dangerous and forbidden. "I'm grateful for my sister's care," I said carefully, the practiced response I'd given 100 times before. "That wasn't my question," the king said softly. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. I knew what I should say, what I was expected to say. But something in those ancient eyes made lies impossible. "No, Your Majesty," I whispered. "I don't see it as a benefit." Vance's hand closed around my wrist, his grip bruising. "You forget yourself," he hissed. The king's eyes flicked to where Vance held me, then back to my face. "Continue serving, Paige," he said, his voice neutral but his eyes burning with something I couldn't interpret. "We will speak again." I nodded, relief and terror mingling in my chest as I finished pouring his drink with trembling hands. When I stepped back, Vance's fingers dug deeper into my arm, a promise of punishment to come. The conversation at the table resumed, politics and power plays wrapped in velvet courtesy, but I felt the king's attention return to me occasionally throughout the evening, a weight I couldn't see but could certainly feel. Hours passed in a blur of refilled glasses and tense silence. My arms ached from holding the tray. My feet throbbed in the stiff black shoes that were part of my uniform. But worse than the physical discomfort was Vance's growing agitation. He drank more than usual, his movements becoming less controlled, his laughter too sharp at the edges. I knew the signs. I'd served him long enough to recognize when his mood was deteriorating, when the careful facade of civilization began to slip. On such nights, the human servants made themselves scarce, all except those unfortunate enough to be directly assigned to him. "Like me." "More," he commanded, holding out his empty glass without looking at me. The conversation around the table had shifted to hunting territories, with the king listening more than speaking, as the Sterling clan laid out their grievances against neighboring vampire families. I stepped forward, the decanter now nearly empty. As I poured, I noticed a slight tremor in my hands, fatigue making itself known after hours of standing. "Your Majesty," Lady Corinne was saying, "the Blackwood clan has encroached on our eastern feeding grounds for the third time this season. Their hunters show no respect for the boundaries established in the accord." The king made a non-committal sound, his attention seemingly on the blood wine I was pouring. "And what evidence do you have of these encroachments?" "3 of our marked humans were found drained," Vance interjected, his words slightly slurred. "Blackwood fangs leave distinctive wounds. They're testing you, testing the strength of your rule." I finished pouring and began to step back, but Vance caught my wrist again, holding me in place. His thumb pressed against my pulse point, a gesture that seemed casual but sent warning signals racing through me. Perhaps," the king said, his voice mild, but his eyes sharp as they flicked to Vance's hand on my wrist. "It is not my rule they are testing, but your stewardship of territories granted to you by the crown." Vance's grip tightened painfully. "Are you suggesting the Sterlings are at fault, Your Majesty?" "I suggest nothing," the king replied. "I merely observe." Lady Corinne laughed, the sound brittle. "My son speaks too boldly after too much drink, Your Majesty. The Sterlings have always been and remain your most loyal subjects." The king's gaze swept over her, unreadable. "Loyalty is a curious thing, Lady Corinne. It changes shape depending on who observes it, and from what angle." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I tried to pull away from Vance's grip, but his fingers only tightened, the pressure becoming painful. "More wine for our king," Vance said suddenly, his voice too loud. "Paige, don't just stand there." "The decanter is nearly empty, sir," I murmured, aware of the danger in his tone. "Then get more," he snapped, finally releasing me with a small shove that made me stumble slightly. I steadied myself, acutely aware of the king's eyes on me. "Yes, sir. Right away." As I turned to leave, Vance leaned close, his lips nearly brushing my ear as he whispered, "When you return, don't forget to ask about your sister's latest treatment report. I have it in my quarters. Such concerning news." My blood turned to ice. I froze mid-step, the implications of his words stealing my breath. Lila. Something was wrong with Lila. "Is there a problem?" the king asked, his voice cutting through my panic. I turned back, struggling to keep my expression neutral. "No, Your Majesty. I'm just fetching more wine." Vance smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Hurry back, Paige. We wouldn't want to keep His Majesty waiting." I nodded and moved away, my mind racing. Vance was threatening Lila, that much was clear. But why now? What game was he playing? The wine cellar was 3 floors below, accessed through the servants' stairs at the back of the ballroom. I moved as quickly as decorum allowed, desperate to return before Vance could say or do anything else to endanger my sister. The cellar was cold and dimly lit, rows of bottles stretching into shadows. I located the special vintage, labeled only with a red wax seal bearing the Sterling crest, and filled a new decanter with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. By the time I returned to the ballroom, my heart was pounding so hard, I felt lightheaded. The king was still seated at the high table, but the atmosphere had changed. Tensions seemed higher, voices lower. Vance's face was flushed, the vampire equivalent of being drunk on blood wine, a rare and dangerous state. I approached carefully, setting the fresh decanter on the table and beginning to pour for the king first, as protocol demanded. The crimson liquid caught the light, thick and viscous as it filled the crystal glass. "Your Majesty," Lady Corinne was saying, her voice honey over steel, Surely you see the wisdom in allowing the established houses to manage their own territories. Micromanagement has never been the Crown's approach. The Crown's approach evolves as needed, Lady Corinne, the king replied, his eyes briefly meeting mine as I finished pouring his drink. Something in his gaze made my breath catch. A warning, perhaps, or something else I couldn't decipher. I moved to Vance next, carefully tilting the decanter toward his outstretched glass. He leaned closer, his cold breath ghosting against my cheek. I received the medical report this morning, he murmured, his voice for my ears alone. Such a shame about the setback. The cancer's spreading again. But treatment costs are so prohibitive. Perhaps we should renegotiate your contract. Another 5 years might cover it. My hand trembled violently. The decanter tilted too far, dark liquid splashing over the rim of his glass, spilling across the pristine white tablecloth and onto his immaculate suit. Vance moved with vampire speed on his feet in an instant. Clumsy bitch, he snarled, all pretense of civility vanishing as his hand connected with my face in a slap that sent me staggering backward. The decanter slipped from my fingers, shattering on the marble floor in a spray of glass and blood wine. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that fell over the ballroom. You worthless human, Vance continued, advancing on me as I struggled to regain my balance. Do you know what this suit costs? What that vintage costs? I'm sorry, I gasped, tasting blood where my lip had split against my teeth. It was an accident. Accidents have consequences, he hissed, grabbing my arm and yanking me toward him. His eyes had darkened to near black, fangs extending in his rage. Perhaps it's time you learned that lesson properly. I tried to pull away, panic rising in my throat. Please don't. Enough. The single word cut through the room like a blade. The king stood, his movement so fluid it seemed he simply appeared on his feet. He hadn't raised his voice, yet the command in it froze everyone in place. Vance's grip on my arm tightened painfully. Your Majesty, this is a household matter. The girl requires discipline. The king's crimson eyes fixed on Vance, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Release her. She is sterling property, Vance insisted, though I felt a tremor run through his hand. Her contract. Release. Her. Each word fell like a stone into still water. For a moment I thought Vance would refuse. His fingers dug deeper into my flesh, and I bit back a cry of pain. Then slowly, he uncurled his grip and stepped back. The king moved around the table with unhurried grace, each step deliberate as he approached us. The assembled vampires watched in silence, the air thick with tension and the metallic scent of spilled blood wine. You claim she is property, the king said, stopping before Vance, based on a contract. Yes, Your Majesty, Vance replied, a muscle twitching in his jaw. A legally binding agreement, 10 years of service for her sister's medical care. The king's gaze shifted to me briefly, then back to Vance. And if someone were to acquire this contract, what then? Lady Corinne stepped forward, her face a mask of diplomatic concern. Your Majesty, surely you don't intend to interfere in a private business arrangement? The Sterlings have held debt contracts for centuries. I'm simply curious about the terms, the king replied, his voice deceptively mild. Humor me, Lady Corinne. She hesitated, then inclined her head. The contract, like all our agreements, includes provisions for transfer of ownership, at a price, of course. Of course, the king echoed. He turned to Vance again. And what price would you set for this particular contract? Vance's eyes narrowed. It's not for sale, Your Majesty. The king smiled then, a slow, terrible expression that held no warmth. I wasn't offering to buy it. What happened next occurred so quickly I could barely follow it. One moment Vance was standing before me, the next he was on his knees, the king's hand around his throat. Lady Corinne cried out, stepping forward only to be halted by a look from the king that froze her in place. "The ancient law is clear," the king said, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent ballroom. "A ruler may claim by right of conquest what cannot be acquired by negotiation." Vance struggled against the king's grip, his face contorted with rage and fear. "You cannot—" The king's hand tightened, cutting off his words. "I am the law, Vance Sterling. I can do whatever I please." He looked up at the assembled vampires, his crimson eyes burning. "Let it be known that I claim this human's contract by right of conquest. Her debt to the Sterling clan is hereby void." The room seemed to collectively hold its breath. Vance's face had turned an alarming shade of purple, his eyes bulging as the king's grip tightened. Lady Corinne stood frozen, her aristocratic features twisted in helpless fury. I couldn't process what was happening. The king was claiming my contract? By right of conquest? "Your Majesty," Lady Corinne finally managed, her voice strained. "This is highly irregular. The Sterling family has served the crown loyally for generations." The king's attention shifted to her, though his grip on Vance never loosened. "And yet your son saw fit to parade his blood servant before me like a trophy, knowing full well the ancient laws." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" He released Vance suddenly, and the vampire heir collapsed to the floor, gasping and clutching his throat. The king straightened his already immaculate jacket and turned to me. "Come," he said simply, extending a hand in my direction. I hesitated, my gaze darting between Vance's crumpled form and the king's outstretched hand. What did this mean? Had I just been transferred from one master to another? The whispers around us grew louder, vampires leaning toward one another behind gloved hands and ornate fans. I said, "Come." The king's voice hardened, and I felt my feet moving before my brain had decided to obey. Years of conditioning made it impossible to refuse a direct command from a vampire, especially one of his stature. As my trembling fingers touched his, the king's hand closed around mine with surprising gentleness. His skin was cool but not cold, and I felt a strange current pass between us, like static electricity but deeper, running along my nerves. "This isn't over," Vance snarled from the floor, his voice ragged. "The contract has specific terms, which no longer concern you." The king cut him off, not bothering to look down. "Marcus." The lieutenant appeared at his side instantly. "Your Majesty?" "Escort us out. Lady Page requires air." Lady Page. No one had ever addressed me with a title before. I was always just the blood servant, or the human, or at best, simply Page. Marcus nodded and moved ahead of us, clearing a path through the stunned crowd. The king guided me forward with a light pressure on my lower back, his touch burning through the thin fabric of my gown. My heart hammered against my ribs, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Was I being rescued or claimed? And did it matter? When either way I remained bound, the cool night air hit my face as we emerged onto a wide terrace overlooking manicured gardens. Only then did I realize how stifling the ballroom had been, thick with the scent of vampire perfumes designed to mask the metallic undertone of blood that always clung to their kind. "You're trembling," the king observed, releasing my hand. "What did you expect?" The words escaped before I could stop them. I immediately tensed, waiting for punishment, but the king merely raised an eyebrow. Caution, perhaps gratitude. Gratitude? I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the mild evening. "You just bought me," or conquered me, or whatever that was. Am I supposed to thank you for changing my owner? Something flashed in his eyes. Anger. Amusement. It was gone too quickly to identify. Is that what you think happened in there? He asked quietly. Isn't it? My voice cracked. The contract still exists. I'm still bound by it. The only difference is now I serve you instead of the Sterlings. The king studied me for a long moment, his crimson eyes unreadable in the moonlight. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a small leather-bound book. I recognized it immediately, the ledger containing my contract, the one Vance had kept on his person at all times, a constant reminder of my servitude. How did you... Vampires move quickly when motivated. He held the ledger between us. This is what binds you, yes? The physical manifestation of your debt? I nodded, unable to tear my gaze from the small book that had controlled my existence for 5 years. My sister Lila's life had been saved, but mine had been forfeit in exchange. Then observe carefully what happens next. The king's fingers tightened around the ledger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, impossibly, the leather began to smoke. Tiny tendrils curled upward as the binding blackened and cracked. The pages within caught next, glowing orange at the edges before erupting into flames that licked hungrily at the king's fingers without seeming to harm him. I watched, mesmerized, as my contract burned to ash in his palm. When nothing remained but a small pile of cinders, he opened his hand and let the night breeze carry them away. There, he said simply, you are bound to no one. I stared at his empty hand, then at his face, searching for the trick, the catch, the hidden clause that would reveal this as just another form of cruelty. Why? I finally managed, my voice barely audible, because no one should own another's life. His answer came without hesitation, but I sensed there was more he wasn't saying. The Sterlings won't accept this, I said, glancing back toward the ballroom. They'll come for me. For breaking the contract. They can do nothing, the king interrupted. The contract no longer exists, and they would not dare move against me. You don't understand, I insisted, panic rising in my throat. Vance will never let this go. He's obsessed with... I stopped myself, unwilling to reveal the depths of Vance's fixation on me. The way his eyes followed me. The way his fangs extended whenever we were alone. The king's expression darkened. I understand more than you know. He stepped closer, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Vance Sterling has overstepped for the last time. His family's influence has made him believe he is untouchable. A cold smile touched his lips. I am about to correct that misapprehension. Marcus appeared at the terrace entrance. Your Majesty, the car is ready. The king nodded. Lady Page will be coming with us. Where? I asked, suddenly wary again. Somewhere safe, he replied. Unless you'd prefer to remain here. I glanced back at the ballroom, where I could see Vance being helped to his feet by his mother. His eyes met mine through the glass doors, and the hatred in them made my blood run cold. No, I whispered. I'll come with you. The king's car was a sleek, armored vehicle with darkened windows and a silent engine. Marcus held the door open, and I slid into the plush leather interior, my borrowed gown rustling against the seats. The king followed, sitting across from me rather than beside me, which I found oddly considerate. As the car pulled away from the Sterling estate, I watched the ornate mansion recede into the distance. For 5 years, those walls had been my prison. Now I was leaving, but to what? Freedom seemed too much to hope for. You haven't told me your name, the king said suddenly. I blinked in confusion. You know my name. You called me Lady Page back there. No, your full name. The name you were born with. Not the one the Sterlings permitted you to keep. I hesitated, then said, Page Elizabeth Winters. He nodded, as if committing it to memory. A good name. Strong. And you? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. Everyone just calls you the King or Your Majesty. Do you have an actual name? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Adrian. Adrian Devereaux. Adrian, I repeated softly, testing the shape of it on my tongue. It suited him somehow, elegant but with an edge of danger. We rode in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows. I had no idea where we were going, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. The king, Adrian, had destroyed my contract. But what did that mean? What did he want from me? Your thoughts are very loud, Adrian observed, startling me from my reverie. I'm trying to understand what's happening, I admitted. Why you intervened, what comes next. What comes next is your choice, he said, for perhaps the first time in years. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Is it really? The Sterlings will never stop hunting me, and even if they did, I gestured helplessly. I have nowhere to go, no money, no possessions, nothing. My sister, I stopped, my throat tightening. Your sister is the reason you entered into the blood contract, Adrian said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Lila, she was dying. The treatments were experimental, expensive. The Sterlings offered to pay for everything if I couldn't finish the sentence. The memory of that desperate bargain still too raw. And did they? Pay for everything? Yes, she's alive because of them. I stared down at my hands. That's what makes this so complicated. I hate them, but I owe them my sister's life. Adrian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. You owed them a debt, which you have been repaying for 5 years with your blood and servitude. The contract is fulfilled, Paige. You owe them nothing more. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. But years of conditioning couldn't be undone with a single gesture, no matter how dramatic. Where are we going? I asked instead of arguing. My estate outside the city. You'll be safe there while we determine your next steps. Unless you'd prefer to face this alone. I shook my head quickly. Whatever Adrian's motives, I needed his protection, at least until I could figure out my own path forward. The car turned onto a private road, winding through dense forest that blocked out the moonlight. After several minutes, the trees opened up to reveal a sprawling estate, its architecture a blend of Gothic and modern elements that somehow worked in harmony. Unlike the ostentatious display of the Sterling mansion, Adrian's home projected quiet power and understated elegance. Marcus opened the car door, and Adrian exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. As my feet touched the gravel drive, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if I'd been here before, though I knew that was impossible. Welcome to Ravencrest, Adrian said, watching my reaction closely. It's beautiful, I murmured, taking in the soaring stone facade and the intricate ironwork of the balconies and gates. It's home, he replied simply. And for now, it's yours as well. Inside, the estate was even more impressive. Vaulted ceilings stretched overhead, while plush carpets muffled our footsteps. The decor was a tasteful mix of antiques and contemporary pieces, with artwork that spanned centuries adorning the walls. Unlike the Sterling mansion, which always felt cold and sterile, Ravencrest had a lived-in quality that made it feel like a home rather than a museum. You must be exhausted, Adrian said, guiding me through a grand hallway. I've had a suite prepared for you. We can discuss everything else in the morning. I'm not sure I could sleep right now, I admitted. My mind was racing, replaying the events of the evening on an endless loop. Adrian studied me for a moment, then nodded. Then perhaps a cup of tea first? The kitchen is this way. I followed him, noting with surprise that he seemed to know his way around his own kitchen, pulling out a kettle and filling it with water rather than summoning a servant to do it for him. "You seem surprised," he commented, setting the kettle on a sleek induction stove. I've never seen a vampire make tea before." He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. "Contrary to popular belief, we don't spend all our time drinking blood and plotting world domination." "Just some of the time, then?" The quip slipped out before I could stop it. To my relief, Adrian laughed. "Just some of the time," he agreed, reaching for a canister of loose tea leaves. "The rest is surprisingly mundane. Paperwork, meetings, diplomatic functions." "And rescuing blood servants from their masters?" I added, more seriously. His hands stilled for a moment. "That was an exception." "Why me?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me since he first intervened. "There must be hundreds of blood servants in the city. Why did you choose to help me?" Adrian turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Because you looked at me." "What?" "At the ball, when I entered. Every other human in that room kept their eyes down, as they've been trained to do. But you looked directly at me. Not with defiance or challenge, but with curiosity, recognition almost." He shook his head slightly. "It intrigued me." I remembered that moment, the strange pull I'd felt when our eyes met across the ballroom. I'd attributed it to fear, to the natural intimidation any human would feel in the presence of the Vampire King. But perhaps it had been something else. The kettle whistled, breaking the tension between us. Adrian turned away to prepare the tea, and I took a steadying breath. Whatever this was, rescue, abduction, something in between, I needed to keep my wits about me. Adrian handed me a delicate porcelain cup, the tea inside steaming and fragrant with hints of bergamot and lavender. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, and I felt that same electric current from earlier, a sensation that seemed to bypass my skin and connect directly to something deeper within. "Thank you," I murmured, cradling the warm cup between my palms. "You're welcome, Paige." My name sounded different when he said it, weighted with meaning I couldn't decipher. We drank our tea in companionable silence, the events of the evening settling around us like dust after a storm. For the first time in years, I felt something dangerous stirring in my chest. Hope. Morning came with harsh reality. I awoke in a luxurious bedroom that momentarily disoriented me, the silk sheets and plush mattress a far cry from my sparse quarters at the Sterling estate. Sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, casting the room in a warm glow that seemed at odds with the news Marcus delivered as I broke my fast. "The Sterling clan has filed a formal complaint with the High Council," he informed Adrian, who sat across from me at the breakfast table. "They're claiming theft of property and demanding your immediate return." My appetite vanished. "Property," I echoed hollowly. "Of course." Adrian's expression remained calm, though I noticed his jaw tighten slightly. "Their complaint has no legal standing. The contract was voided by right of conquest, witnessed by dozens of vampires of good standing, and they're arguing that the right of conquest applies only to territory and political assets, not to private contracts between a vampire house and a human subject," Marcus continued. "Lady Corinne has apparently spent the night consulting with legal scholars who support this interpretation." "Of course she has," Adrian muttered. He turned to me. "This changes nothing, Paige. You are not returning to them." "Can they force the issue?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "They can try," Adrian replied. The High Council will hear arguments from both sides, but ultimately, my word carries significant weight. Because you're the king, I said. A shadow crossed his face. Yes, though that title comes with its own complications. Before I could ask what he meant, Marcus cleared his throat. There's more. The Sterlings are claiming that Lady Page's contract included a clause regarding her sister's ongoing treatment. They're suggesting that without the protection of the contract, the sister's care will be discontinued. The room seemed to tilt around me. Lila, I whispered, horror washing over me. They wouldn't. They would, Adrian said grimly. It's a transparent attempt at leverage, but effective nonetheless. I pushed away from the table, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. I have to go back. I can't let them hurt Lila. She's all I have left. Adrian was at my side in an instant, moving with that unnerving vampire speed. Paige, wait. Think this through. There's nothing to think about. They'll kill her if I don't return. No, they won't, he said firmly, because I won't let them. I stared at him, wanting desperately to believe. How can you stop them? You said yourself the High Council will hear arguments. What if they rule against you? Then we'll find another way. He took my hands in his, and I was too distraught to pull away. I give you my word, Paige Elizabeth Winters. No harm will come to your sister. Something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, made me hesitate. Why are you doing this? All of this? What do you want from me? Adrian's thumbs traced small circles on the backs of my hands, the gesture oddly soothing. Would you believe me if I said I want nothing? No, I answered honestly. Everyone wants something. A sad smile touched his lips. Fair enough. Then let's say I want to right a wrong. The blood servant system has existed for too long without challenge. Perhaps it's time for change. And I'm what? Your test case? Your political statement? You're a person, he said simply. One who has endured enough. Before I could respond, Marcus reappeared at the doorway. Your Majesty, we have visitors. Adrian's expression hardened. The Sterlings? Marcus nodded. Lady Corinne and Lord Vance with an entourage of 6 guards and their legal counsel. They're at the gate, demanding entry. Demanding, Adrian repeated, his voice dangerously soft. How presumptuous. My heart began to race. What will you do? Meet with them, of course. He released my hands and straightened to his full height. It would be impolite to turn away guests. Adrian, I said, surprising myself by using his name. They're not here for pleasantries. No, he agreed. They're here for you, which is why you'll remain here out of sight while I deal with them. But this is not negotiable, Paige. His tone brooked no argument. Marcus will stay with you. If anything goes wrong, he'll get you to safety. I wanted to protest further, but the look in Adrian's eyes stopped me. This wasn't just about my protection. It was about power. If I appeared beside him, the Sterlings would see it as weakness, as evidence that he needed to present me to prove his claim. By keeping me hidden, he was asserting his authority to handle this matter on his terms. Fine, I conceded, but I want to know everything that happens. You will, he promised. Marcus, take Lady Page to my study. It offers the best security while still allowing her to observe the proceedings. Marcus nodded and gestured for me to follow him. As we left the dining room, I glanced back to see Adrian adjusting his cuffs, a small, anticipatory smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He looked like a predator preparing to toy with his prey. The study was a magnificent room, 2 stories tall with walls lined with books and a massive desk of polished mahogany dominating the center. One wall featured a series of monitors displaying security feeds from around the estate. Marcus directed me to a particular screen showing the main entrance hall, where Adrian now stood, waiting. "Can they see us?" I asked, gesturing to the cameras. "No," Marcus assured me. "This is a one-way system. We can see them, but they have no idea they're being observed." The front doors opened, and Lady Corinne swept in, her tall figure draped in mourning black, despite the fact that no one had died. Yet. Vance followed, a livid bruise encircling his throat where Adrian had gripped him the night before. Behind them came their guards, and a thin, nervous-looking vampire clutching a leather portfolio who I assumed was their lawyer. "Your Majesty," Lady Corinne said, executing a perfect curtsy that somehow managed to convey contempt rather than respect. "How kind of you to receive us on such short notice." "Lady Corinne," Adrian replied, his voice cool and formal. "Lord Vance, I trust you're recovering well from our discussion last evening?" Vance's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. "Where is she?" he demanded, ignoring the niceties entirely. "She?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "I'm afraid you'll need to be more specific." "Don't play games," Vance snarled. "Where is Paige, our blood servant that you illegally seized?" "Ah." Adrian's expression remained impassive. "You're referring to Lady Paige Winters, a free woman under my protection. She is not receiving visitors at present." Lady Corinne stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on her son's arm. "Your Majesty, we understand there may have been some confusion regarding the status of our contract with the human. Our legal counsel has prepared documentation clarifying the situation." She nodded to the nervous lawyer, who hurried forward and extended the portfolio toward Adrian. The king made no move to take it. "There is no confusion, Lady Corinne," Adrian said. "The contract was voided by right of conquest, as is my prerogative under ancient law." "A misapplication of ancient law," the lawyer interjected, his voice surprisingly steady given the tension in the room. "The right of conquest pertains to territorial disputes between vampire houses, not to private contracts with human servants." "Is that so?" Adrian's tone was dangerously pleasant. "And yet the Codex Sanguinis, Section 7, Paragraph 3 states quite clearly, all possessions, territories, and binding agreements may be claimed by a ruler of higher standing through right of conquest when negotiations have failed." "Would you care to dispute the Codex itself?" The lawyer paled, if such a thing was possible for a vampire. "No, Your Majesty, but the interpretation is mine to make," Adrian finished for him. "Unless you wish to challenge my authority as king." A heavy silence fell over the entrance hall. Even Vance seemed to recognize the dangerous ground they were treading. To challenge the king's interpretation of vampire law was tantamount to challenging his right to rule, an offense punishable by death. Lady Corinne recovered first. "Of course not, Your Majesty. We merely wish to point out that the human in question is bound to us by more than just the contract. Her sister's continued medical care depends on our generosity." My hands clenched into fists as I watched the monitor. Using Lila as leverage was low, even for the Sterlings. Adrian's expression didn't change, but I noticed a subtle shift in his posture, a coiling of potential energy that reminded me of a snake preparing to strike. "How fascinating," he said softly. "You come to my home, demand entry, question my authority, and now attempt to extort compliance through threats against an innocent. Tell me, Lady Corinne, do you value your position in vampire society?" She blinked, clearly thrown by the question. "Of course, Your Majesty." "And you, Lord Vance, do you value your future prospects, your standing among your peers?" Vance's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating, quite explicitly, That if any harm comes to Lila Winters, if her treatment is interrupted, if she suffers so much as a moment's discomfort, I will personally ensure that the Sterling name becomes synonymous with disgrace. Adrian's voice remained conversational, which somehow made the threat more chilling. Your assets will be frozen, your territories redistributed, your bloodline barred from council proceedings for 1,000 years. Lady Corinne gasped. You cannot— I can. Adrian cut her off. I am the king. And unlike you, I do not make idle threats. I stared at the monitor, stunned by the vehemence of Adrian's defense. He hadn't just rejected their demands. He'd countered with a devastating threat of his own, one that would destroy the Sterling clan if carried out. Now, Adrian continued, his tone lightening as if they'd been discussing the weather. I believe our business is concluded. Lady Page remains under my protection. Her sister's care will continue uninterrupted, and you will withdraw your complaint from the High Council immediately. Vance stepped forward, shaking off his mother's restraining hand. This isn't over, he hissed. She belongs to me. I paid for her in blood and gold, and I will have what's mine. Adrian moved so quickly the camera barely captured it. One moment he was standing several feet away. The next he was directly in front of Vance, their faces inches apart. She belongs to no one, Adrian said, each word precise and deadly. Least of all you, Vance Sterling. The only reason you still draw breath is because I choose to be merciful. Do not mistake mercy for weakness. I could see Vance trembling, though whether from fear or rage was unclear. Lady Corinne placed herself between them, her face a mask of cold dignity. We will withdraw our complaint, she said stiffly. But this matter is not resolved, Your Majesty. The human made a binding oath to our family. Such things cannot be dismissed, even by a king. Adrian stepped back, allowing her the small victory of the last word. Good day, Lady Corinne. Lord Vance, I trust you can find your own way out. The Sterlings departed with as much dignity as they could muster, their entourage following silently behind. Only when the massive front doors closed did Adrian's rigid posture relax slightly. He turned and looked directly at the camera, as if he knew exactly where I was watching from. It's safe now, he said. Come down. Marcus escorted me back to the entrance hall, where Adrian waited, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other, the weight of what had just transpired hanging between us. Thank you, I finally said, the words inadequate but sincere, for protecting Lila. I meant what I said, he replied. No harm will come to her. I believe you. And surprisingly, I did. There was something about Adrian that inspired trust, despite everything I'd been taught about vampires and their manipulative nature. The Sterlings won't give up easily, Marcus warned, breaking the moment between us. Lady Corinne may have agreed to withdraw the complaint, but they'll find another angle of attack. Adrian nodded, which is why we need to be proactive. Marcus arranged for Lila Winters to be transferred to our private medical facility immediately. Full security detail. No visitors without my explicit approval. My heart leapt into my throat. You're moving Lila? But that could be dangerous for her condition. More dangerous than leaving her within the Sterling's reach? Adrian countered gently. They've already shown they're willing to use her as leverage. We need to remove that option. He was right, of course. As long as Lila remained in a Sterling-controlled facility, she was vulnerable. But the thought of moving her, of potentially compromising her fragile health, terrified me. I want to see her, I said. Before you move her, I need to explain what's happening. Make sure she understands. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. Of course. We'll arrange it immediately. There's something else, Marcus interjected. Something Lady Corinne said that concerns me. About a binding oath. Adrian's expression darkened. I noticed that as well. Paige, did you make some kind of oath to the Sterlings beyond the written contract? I frowned, trying to remember the exact wording of the agreement I'd signed 5 years ago. I don't think so. It was a standard blood contract. My service in exchange for Lila's treatment. There must be something else, Adrian mused. Something they believe gives them a claim that supersedes even my intervention. A chill ran through me as a memory surfaced. Vance leaning close on the night I signed the contract. His breath cold against my ear as he whispered words I was too distraught to fully comprehend. Something about blood and binding and eternity. There might be, I admitted, my voice small. The night I signed the contract, Vance said something, performed some kind of ritual. I was so focused on Lila, on making sure she got the treatment she needed. I didn't pay much attention. Adrian and Marcus exchanged a grave look. What? I demanded. What does that mean? It means, Adrian said slowly, that the Sterlings may have bound you with more than just a legal contract. They may have enacted a blood oath, an ancient form of magic that binds one being to another on a spiritual level. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So, even though you destroyed the contract, you might still be bound to them through the oath, Adrian finished grimly, which would explain Lady Corinne's confidence despite my intervention. I felt sick, my brief taste of hope souring in my stomach. Can it be broken? This blood oath? Everything can be broken, Adrian assured me, though something in his tone suggested it wouldn't be simple. But first, we need to understand exactly what kind of oath was used. How do we do that? We start by visiting your sister, Adrian decided. Then we research blood oaths. The answers we need are out there, Paige. We just have to find them before the Sterlings make their next move. As if summoned by his words, Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He read it quickly, his expression growing grave. What is it? Adrian demanded. A message from our contact at the High Council, Marcus replied. The Sterlings have withdrawn their formal complaint as promised. That's good, isn't it? I asked, confused by their somber reactions. They've replaced it with something else, Marcus continued. They're invoking the right of reclamation, an ancient ceremony that allows them to reclaim property bound by blood oath, regardless of intervening claims. Adrian's face went completely still, a predator's stillness that sent shivers down my spine. When? He asked, his voice barely audible. 3 days from now, at midnight. Marcus looked up from his phone, his expression grim. They've already secured the council's approval. It seems Lady Corinne has more allies than we anticipated. I looked between them, panic rising in my chest. What does this mean? What happens in 3 days? Adrian turned to me, his crimson eyes burning with an emotion I couldn't name. It means, Paige, that in 3 days, the Sterlings will attempt to reclaim you through an ancient ritual that even I cannot legally prevent. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Unless we can break the blood oath before then. And if we can't, I whispered, already knowing the answer. Then you will be bound to Vance Sterling for eternity, Adrian said softly. With no hope of escape, my knees threatened to buckle as Adrian's words hung in the air between us. Eternity with Vance. No escape. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls pressing in until I could barely breathe. There has to be something we can do, I whispered, my voice breaking. Some loophole, some way to fight this. Adrian crossed the room in 2 swift strides, taking my trembling hands in his. The cool touch of his skin anchored me. pulling me back from the edge of panic. "There is," he said, his voice low and fierce. "The right of reclamation is powerful, but not unbeatable. It requires the blood oath to still be intact at the moment of claiming." "So we need to break the oath before the ceremony," I said, grasping at this sliver of hope. "Yes." Adrian's thumbs traced circles on my palms. "Blood oaths can be broken 3 ways: fulfillment of the terms, death of the creditor, or—" He hesitated, his crimson eyes searching mine. "Or a blood bond that supersedes it." Marcus cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we should discuss strategy." Adrian nodded, reluctantly releasing my hands. "The Blood Moon Gala is in 2 days. Every vampire of consequence will be there, including the Sterlings." "The night before the rite," I realized. "Yes, and our best opportunity to end this once and for all." Adrian's expression hardened. "The Sterlings believe they've outmaneuvered us. They're wrong." For the next 2 days, Adrian's penthouse became a war room. Maps of the Sterling estate appeared alongside guest lists for the gala. Marcus came and went at all hours, bringing information, taking orders. I trained until my muscles screamed, learning to defend myself against vampire speed and strength. "Again," Adrian would say, helping me to my feet after knocking me down for the 20th time. "You're getting better." On the morning of the gala, a package arrived for me. A gown of midnight blue silk that shimmered like the night sky, adorned with tiny crystals that caught the light like stars. "You'll need to look the part," Adrian said when I emerged from my room. His eyes darkened as they swept over me, the hunger in them unmistakable. Beautiful and deadly, as twilight fell, we prepared to depart. Adrian wore formal black, the severity of his attire broken only by a blood-red stone at his throat. Marcus handed me a silver dagger, small enough to be concealed in the folds of my gown. "Last resort," he said grimly. "Silver won't kill them, but it will slow them down." Adrian took my hand, his touch steadying my nerves. "Remember, Paige, tonight you are not their servant. You are under my protection, and they will respect that or suffer the consequences." The Sterling estate sprawled across the hillside like a sleeping beast, windows blazing with light. Vampires in formal attire drifted up the grand staircase, their movements too graceful to be human. My heart hammered against my ribs as our car joined the procession. "Stay close to me," Adrian murmured as we approached the entrance. "The Sterlings won't try anything openly, not with the entire court watching." The ballroom took my breath away. Vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of ancient hunts, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light over the assembled vampires. At the far end, on a raised dais, sat Lady Corinne, regal in crimson velvet. Vance stood at her side, his cold eyes scanning the crowd. Our entrance caused a ripple of whispers. The Vampire King rarely attended such functions, and never with a human at his side. Adrian's hand rested possessively at the small of my back as we moved through the crowd, accepting greetings from nobles who eyed me with barely concealed curiosity. "Your Majesty," Lady Corinne's voice cut through the murmur of conversation as we approached the dais. "What an unexpected pleasure." Adrian inclined his head slightly, the barest acknowledgement. "Lady Corinne, I trust you received my message regarding tomorrow night's ceremony." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed, though I confess I'm surprised to see our little blood servant here." Her gaze shifted to me, cold and assessing. "Enjoying your final hours of freedom, dear?" Before I could respond, Vance stepped forward, extending his hand to me. "A dance, Paige? For old time's sake?" Adrian's grip on my waist tightened fractionally, but his face revealed nothing. We had anticipated this. Vance would try to separate me from Adrian to assert his claim publicly. I believe that's Paige's decision, Adrian said smoothly. All eyes turned to me. This was it. The moment to show the court I was more than property to be passed between masters. I'd rather not, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've had enough of sterling hospitality to last a lifetime. A flash of anger crossed Vance's face, quickly masked. Come now, Paige. One dance won't kill you. He reached for my arm. Adrian moved so quickly I barely saw it, his hand catching Vance's wrist before he could touch me. She declined, he said softly, dangerously. I suggest you respect her wishes. The tension in the room thickened as Vance slowly withdrew his hand. Of course, he said, his smile tight. Perhaps later. As they moved away, Adrian guided me toward the dance floor. Well done, he murmured. But this is just the opening move. We danced, Adrian's supernatural grace compensating for my human limitations. Around us, the court watched and whispered. I caught fragments of conversation, speculation about Adrian's interest in me, about tomorrow's ceremony, about the unprecedented sight of a blood servant openly defying her masters. They're watching the exits, Adrian whispered as he turned me in his arms. Marcus reports 6 of Sterling's guards stationed around the perimeter. They're planning something tonight, I realized. They don't want to wait for the ceremony. Adrian's eyes gleamed. Good. Let them make the first move. As the dance ended, a servant appeared at Adrian's side with a message. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. What is it? I asked. Lady Corinne requests a private audience with both of us. He looked down at me. This is it, Paige. Are you ready? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the silver dagger against my thigh. Yes. We followed the servant through a maze of corridors to a private study. Lady Corinne waited inside, alone except for Vance, who stood by the fireplace, swirling amber liquid in a crystal glass. Your Majesty, Lady Corinne gestured to the chairs opposite her desk. Please sit. Adrian remained standing, positioning himself slightly in front of me. I prefer to stand, thank you. What is this about, Lady Corinne? She smiled, a predator's smile. I thought we might discuss a more amicable resolution to our situation. The rite of reclamation is such an archaic ceremony. Surely we can come to terms that satisfy us both. I'm listening, Adrian said, his voice neutral. Lady Corinne's eyes flicked to me. The girl has become quite important to you, hasn't she? More than a simple blood servant. My interest in Paige is none of your concern, Adrian replied coldly. On the contrary, Vance interjected, setting down his glass. Her debt is our concern. Her blood oath is our property. A debt incurred under false pretenses, I said, unable to contain myself any longer. You never intended to save my sister. You manipulated me from the beginning. Lady Corinne's eyebrows rose. My, she has grown bold under your care, Your Majesty. She leaned forward, her gaze hardening. Let me be clear, girl. Your sister's treatment was exactly what we promised. The fact that she didn't survive is hardly our fault. The words hit me like a physical blow. What did you say? Oh, Lady Corinne's mouth curved in mock surprise. Did Vance not tell you? Your sister passed away 6 months ago. The treatments were unsuccessful. The room tilted around me. 6 months. All this time, I'd been serving them, enduring Vance's cruelty, believing Lila was alive and receiving care. The grief crashed over me in a wave, followed immediately by rage so intense my vision blurred. You lied to me, I whispered, my hands curling into fists. You kept me in servitude for nothing. Not for nothing, Vance said smoothly. Your blood oath remained valid. Your sister's fate is irrelevant to our arrangement. Adrian had gone completely still beside me, a stillness I recognized as deadly. "You maintained her servitude under false pretenses," he said, his voice soft with menace. "You deliberately concealed her sister's death to keep her bound to you." "Business, Your Majesty," Lady Corinne shrugged. "Nothing more. Here is my offer," Adrian said, each word precise and measured. "Release Paige from her blood oath now, and I will forget this deception. Refuse, and I will ensure the entire court knows how House Sterling conducts its affairs." Lady Corinne laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You think the court would care about one human's misfortune? How naive you've become, Adrian." She stood, her composure slipping for the first time. "No, I have a counteroffer. Return the girl to us willingly, and we'll withdraw our complaint to the council regarding your inappropriate attachment to a human servant." Adrian's smile was terrible to behold. "Is that a threat, Lady Corinne?" "A reality check," she snapped. "The king consorting with a blood servant? The court would never accept it. Your position is already precarious after the reforms you've tried to implement. This could be the scandal that topples you." I felt, rather than saw, Adrian's decision crystallize. We had come here prepared for confrontation, but this revelation changed everything. "Paige," Adrian said, not taking his eyes from Lady Corinne, "what do you want?" The question stunned me. No one had asked what I wanted since the day I'd signed my blood oath. I looked at Vance, at the cruelty lurking behind his handsome face, at Lady Corinne with her cold calculation. "I want to be free," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I want justice for my sister, and I want everyone to know what the Sterlings really are." Lady Corinne's face contorted with rage. "You insolent little—" "Careful," Adrian warned, his voice deadly quiet. "Choose your next words with extreme care." Vance moved then, faster than human eyes could track, but Adrian was faster. He intercepted Vance mid-lunge, throwing him against the far wall with enough force to crack the paneling. "Guards!" Lady Corinne shouted, backing away. The door burst open, but instead of Sterling guards, Marcus entered, followed by 3 of Adrian's elite guard. "The house is secured, Your Majesty," Marcus reported calmly. "The Sterling guards have been neutralized." Lady Corinne's face drained of color. "This is an outrage. An attack on a high house." "Is exactly what you planned for us," Adrian finished. "Did you think I wouldn't know about the assassins you positioned throughout the gala? About your plan to eliminate me and claim Paige tonight, rather than wait for the ceremony?" He turned to Marcus. "Bring them." Marcus nodded to one of the guards, who left briefly and returned with 2 vampires in Sterling livery, their expressions terrified. "Tell Lady Corinne what you told me," Adrian commanded. One of the vampires swallowed hard. "We were ordered to poison the king's blood wine and capture the human girl during the confusion that followed." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Lady Corinne seemed at a loss for words. "Assassination," Adrian said softly. "Conspiracy against the crown. These are capital offenses, Lady Corinne. You have no proof that I have their testimony." Adrian cut her off. "And I have this." He produced a small vial from his pocket. "The poison your servant was carrying. My chemist has already identified it as a neurotoxin specific to elder vampires." Vance had regained his feet, his face twisted with hatred. "You won't get away with this. The council will receive full evidence of your crimes," Adrian finished, "including your deliberate deception regarding Paige's sister." He turned to me, his crimson eyes softening slightly. "Paige, by the ancient laws of our kind, I declare your blood oath to House Sterling null and void on grounds of fraud and attempted murder of the crown." The air around us seemed to vibrate, and I felt something snap inside me. A tether I hadn't even realized was there, suddenly cut. I gasped at the sensation, a lightness spreading through my body. No! Vance lunged forward again, this time aiming directly for me. I didn't think. I reached for the silver dagger concealed in my gown and drew it in one fluid motion, just as Adrian had taught me. Vance's momentum carried him directly onto the blade. He howled as the silver made contact, the wound sizzling where metal met vampire flesh. He staggered back, clutching his side, his face a mask of disbelief. You dared. She is no longer yours to command, Adrian said, stepping between us. And for your crimes against the crown and against Paige, I sentence you both to final death. Lady Corinne's composure shattered completely. You can't do this. The council has already been informed, Marcus said from the doorway. They await your testimony, Your Majesty, but given the evidence, they've already authorized execution. What happened next occurred too quickly for my human eyes to fully process. Adrian moved with lethal grace, his hands finding Vance's head and twisting with a sickening crack. Vance's body crumpled to the floor, already beginning to desiccate. Lady Corinne screamed, a sound of pure rage and terror, as Adrian turned to her. She backed away, her eyes wild. Please, she begged, all pretense of dignity gone. Mercy, Your Majesty. I was only protecting my house. Adrian's face was impassive, as I am protecting mine. The execution was swift and final. When it was done, Adrian turned to me, his eyes gradually fading from blood red to their usual deep amber. Are you all right? He asked softly. I looked down at the dagger in my hand, at the dark stain on its silver blade, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Yes, I said, surprised to find it was true. I am. We returned to the ballroom together, the news of what had transpired spreading ahead of us like wildfire. The assembled vampires parted before us, their expressions ranging from shock to calculation to fear. Adrian ascended the dais, drawing me with him, and addressed the stunned court. House Sterling has fallen, guilty of treason against the crown. Let it be known that such actions will not be tolerated, regardless of a house's standing or age. His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining. Let it also be known that Paige Williams stands free of all blood oaths, under my personal protection. Whispers erupted throughout the ballroom, but no one dared speak openly against the king's declaration. One by one, the nobles approached to offer their allegiance, their eyes lingering curiously on our joined hands. Hours later, we returned to Adrian's penthouse. The night sky stretched endless and star-filled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood looking out at the city below, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settling around me like a new skin. What happens now? I asked as Adrian joined me by the window. That depends on you, he said. You're free, Paige. Truly free. You can go anywhere. Do anything. I turned to face him. And if I want to stay? The hope that flared in his eyes took my breath away. Then you would stay as my equal, never my servant. I'd like that, I whispered. His hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch gentle despite the power I'd witnessed earlier. You owe them nothing now, he said softly. Your debt is paid. Your sister is at peace. Tears I hadn't realized I'd been holding back spilled down my cheeks. Adrian brushed them away with his thumb, his expression tender. I never thought I'd be free again, I admitted. I'd forgotten what it felt like. Freedom suits you, he murmured, drawing me closer. As his lips met mine, I felt the last shadows of my captivity dissolve. Outside, the moon hung full and bright, no longer a countdown to my reclamation, but a witness to my rebirth. The night air carried. I breathed it in without fear. And for the first time in years, I breathed it in without fear.